Welcome to News West 9's West Texas View with Johnny Lou Avery.
We're so glad to have you join us today because you're in for another treat. Dr. Bobby Jain is someone you've met before. Dr. Jain is a psychiatrist and he is part of the teaching staff, the faculty at Texas Tech University Health Science Center, but he also is a practicing physician in both Midland and Odessa and serves this whole Permian Basin area. And as we've said before, there is really a shortage of psychiatrists and mental health workers in general. But today I wanted us to talk about a subject that has drawn a lot of attention lately, and that's the death of Robin Williams by his suicide, and brought to focus the mental health issues that Robin Williams was facing. And Dr. Jain, thank you so much for taking your time to come back to the studio. And you're always so informative, and our feedback always says what great information you give us. So let's talk a little bit about Robin Williams.
Well, first of all, Ms. Avery, thank you so much for inviting me. It's also a pleasure to come out and talk to your audience. I always get very good feedback, and it's encouragement to talk to people directly, and it's always a pleasure to be here. Thanks again. I think one of the very saddest news we recently heard was the death of Mr. Robin Williams. That brings us forth one of the very important questions of two things. One is the mental illness that crosses all boundaries. It doesn't matter how rich you are, how famous you are, how successful you are,
how talented
you are, how privileged you are. Mental illness actually strikes anywhere. And the other question comes in the association of mental illness and suicide. Rough estimates indicate that the last census indicated that up to 29,000 to 30,000 people in America die by committing suicide every year. It comes to roughly about 100 or so suicides every year, and every suicide, in my opinion, is preventable. And majority of it, I would say 90-95% of the suicides are because of mental illness, either by depression or being struck in a situation where they experience or they perceive that they had no other option but to commit suicide. Because in life there are always options, and when the person feels that there are no options, that kind of feeling is usually determined by having either depression or some kind of emotional problems, either temporarily or on a chronic basis. Mr. Williams, as we know, had a history of bipolar disorder, which is a condition which roughly 1% of the population of America experience that. But if you have a family member, if a first degree relative or second degree relative, particularly if you have first degree relative, then the chances of having a bipolar illness increases 10 to 15-fold.
Okay, stop right there and tell me what bipolar, define it.
Yeah, bipolar disorder, we used to call it manic depressive illness. Its new name is bipolar disorder, mainly because folks fluctuate between two extremes of moods. Hence the two poles, as we call it. Bipolar means two poles, where at one end, folks go through a period of euphoria, feeling very good about themselves.
On top of the world.
On top of the world, exactly. That's the word they use. On top of the world, having a lot of energy. They are inexhaustible. They come up with a lot of creative ideas. They have less need for sleep. Sometimes they have irritability, but they're always in the go phase. Usually, this phase, though, feels very good. Is marked by some impulsive behavior or wrong judgments, maybe involving sexual indiscretions or investing in business adventures that may not be very practical, or
just social behavior.
Or they mean social behavior, feeling on top of the world, they feel invincible. Usually this state is much unstable and is very temporary. So, and this phase can last between one day, a few hours, to maybe a couple of weeks. During those times, patients can make decisions or do activities which are very detrimental for them in the long run. And so this state being temporary, very quickly, it can be overnight, switch overs to feeling immensely depressed. It's almost like overnight the mood drops like a sack of stones overnight, from being up on the sky and to be way down bottom in the valley. And the depression that they experience is much more severe and sinister than any normal day depression that we can know about. So these folks fluctuate from one extreme to the other extreme without much any provocation. Now, because such depressions and ups and downs are very detrimental to a lifestyle, many of these patients are prone to either developing very strong suicidal ideations and at the same time suffer depression and have a very unstable lifestyle. These folks are more likely to have unstable relationships, unstable history of vocations, and at the same time, by controversial notion, though creative, many of them, not all of them, tend to have a very unstable lifestyle.
And work records. And
right, particularly in terms of their vocation, in terms of their occupation history, they're pretty unstable and very erratic. So it's not uncommon to have bipolar patients to have multiple marriages, multiple relationships, usually short lasting.
And bad financial situations.
And bad financial, multiple bankruptcies to the point of multiple investment, bad investment, wrong judgment, along with unstable working history, multiple jobs, multiple firings, not able to hold a job, those kind of things. So the worst part about bipolar disorder is not only it affects the individual, it also, being very genetic, tends to run the families. Now, even though we cannot control what genes one can inherit from their individual affected kins, bipolar disorder, to surprise of many, is a fairly controllable condition. In fact, if adequately treated, bipolar patients can live a very regular, normal life like any other individual.
But just then, you said when they're up, they're invincible. So then they don't take their medicine.
That's another point. And the sad part about it, bipolar patients are very notorious for medication compliance. Right? So they usually are very difficult to undergo through compliance issue because, as you said, when they are feeling high and very invincible, they are less likely to take medications. But over the years, they learn that this is what they get a better insight into their condition, and most of them are able to learn from the experiences and take medications and have less ups and downs and moods. So these folks are more likely to suffer from substance abuse because they want to control the substances with their moods by the substances.
We're going to have to take a break right there, but we're going to come back and continue this conversation in just a minute. See you in just a minute. Okay.
Stay tuned. West Texas View will be right back.